right. Great. We'll get rolling. Thank you all so much for joining us here today. My name is Maggie Bruns, and I'm the Executive Director here at Prairie Rivers Network. I have been on the job for about 2.5 years now, and I'm absolutely thrilled to share more about the work we are doing here today and give you all the inside scoop on an exciting new program. We actually launched in April, but starting to do more and more external facing work and talking with our members about this. So you all get the inside scoop here today. When I did begin as executive director, we decided we needed to ensure that our membership, our staff, our board, and our programs are much more reflective of the entire population of Illinois and the issues and concerns facing communities across the state. And we've done a lot of work in this space. We've got staff across the state right now. We've expanded tremendously there. But we still have a lot of work to do in terms of diversifying our membership and our programs. But today we are able to share an exciting new program. It's based on data and science and the needs of our state to ensure that we are meeting the mission, our mission to protect water, heal land, and inspire change. Today we'll have the chance to hear from Prairie Rivers Network's 2024 River Steward awardee, Tomas Delgado, for all of his work in Champaign County last year to launch the Nurtured in Nature program. It is a transformative outdoor wellness program designed to address and close the nature gap in Illinois through engagements outdoors that foster connection, healing, and empowerment for Black, Indigenous, and other people of color and their communities. You may hear us throughout the program today refer to BIPOC communities. That's just the acronym that we'll use here. So I just wanted to clarify that up top. And I think you'll really see through the research that's presented today why we needed to step into this space and explicitly specify these communities in our work and our work to address nature access issues across the state. So since meeting Tomas in 2024, I've had the opportunity to chat more and more about the direction of the program and his vision to carry this work forward and scale up across the state. Tomas is now a consultant of Prairie Rivers, and after dealing with some federal funding issues, which you'll hear more about later, we welcome the idea to bring Nurtured in Nature into kind of our menu of program priorities, so that we are not just committed to expanding access to clean air, clean water, clean lands, but also expanding access to nature. This is something that growing up here in central Illinois, this corn and soybean desert, I didn't really think about much until I moved out west to Montana and realized just how cultural it is around public lands, right? And access. It just comes natural to folks out west. And why don't we feel the same right here? What is going on? So we're going to talk a little bit about that today as well. Additionally, today we're also joined by our friends at the Center for American Progress, who have authored a report. It's a little dated at this point, in 2020, about the nature gap across the country. And so we've been referring a lot to that research, and we reached out to learn more and learned that they are actually in the middle of updating that entire project as we speak. So it's very, very exciting. Stay tuned for more to come later this year on that front. But we are thrilled at the work that they are doing and the research on this very important topic. So with that, I'd love to introduce our guest from Center for American Progress to talk about their work in just a minute here. We have Jenny Rowland-Shea, who's the Director of Public Lands at the Center for American Progress and part of their conservation policy team. Additionally, we are joined by Sam Zeno, a Senior Policy Analyst with CAP's Conservation Policy Team as well. We're thankful to have both of you join. A couple housekeeping items before we get rolling. We are recording this. I probably should have said this at the top. I apologize. We have a lot of people who weren't able to join us, and so we do plan to have this, at least the the presentation section posted on our YouTube page for those who are not able to join us. And we will also have a Q&A session towards the end. We won't be kind of breaking up to answer questions throughout, but if you want to plug your question into the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen, please do that throughout the program, and we'll get to those towards the end. And should we not be able to reach all of them, we will be in touch via email and updating our FAQ page on Nurtured in Nature to help answer those questions. So if that all sounds good, I'm going to pass it over to our friends at CAP to get rolling.
Thanks so much, Maggie. Really glad to be here. I'm going to share my screen for a little presentation. Hopefully that is working for everyone. Great. As Maggie said, I'm Jenny Rowland-Shea, Director for Public Lands at Center for American Progress, which is a progressive public policy think tank based in DC. So we'll be talking through an analysis that CAP, along with the Hispanic Access Foundation, put out in 2020, looking at the unequal distribution of nature in the US and the racial and economic disparities that exist in accessing nature. And yeah, Sam will talk a little bit about the analysis we have in the works. This is from 2020, so it's a little bit outdated, but I think still very relevant. So I'll start a little bit of what is the nature gap. Before embarking on this analysis, we knew anecdotally that there were disparities in access to nature, but we wanted a data-driven analysis to better understand the scope and scale of that problem. So we worked with a group called Conservation Science Partners on data analysis that spans lower 48 and Washington, D.C. It used data from dozens of data sets on natural area loss, overlaid that with census data on race, ethnicity, income, and family structure to figure out how those nature losses were distributed among socioeconomic and racial groups. In addition to national data, we have really rich data on nature deprivation at the census tract level. And then we aggregated that to the state level as well. We talk about our findings mostly in terms of nature deprivation, which is referring to a census tract or a community as nature deprived if it has a higher proportion of natural area lost to human activity than the state level median. And basically what that means is that what qualifies as nature deprived varies based on the state. So nature deprivation in Wyoming is going to be a little bit different than what that looks like in New Jersey or Illinois. And the nature gap is basically just the disparities that exist in nearby natural area, including parks, beaches, waterways, etc. But our findings not only confirmed our hunches, but showed how serious the problem was nationally. Communities of color are 3 times more likely than their white counterparts to live in an area that is nature deprived. There's a huge disparity between white communities and Black, Latino, and Asian communities, and to a lesser extent for Native Americans as well. The story is similar when we look at income differences. Low-income communities are more likely than moderate or high-income communities to live in a nature-deprived area by about 20%. And this likelihood is compounded for populations that are both low-income and non-white. One of the really shocking results of this data was the findings for families with children under 18, which are almost twice as likely to be nature deprived. And not only that, but non-white families with children are about twice as likely as white families with children to have nature nearby them. And so if you are thinking, well, this isn't a problem in my state, then you're probably wrong. This is a little bit hard to read, but the chart on the right here shows that these disparities in nature deprivation are almost universal across the US, with small exceptions in Washington, D.C. and New Mexico. The nature gap is particularly acute in some regions. For example, some states in the Northeast, white households are 9 times more likely to have nature nearby than non-white households. And as you can see in the map on the left is showing kind of hotspot areas in red where there are high proportions of people of color, low-income households, and nature-deprived locations. I pulled the date. One second, let me go back to this. Okay, computer is not cooperating. There we go. I pulled the data for Illinois specifically. And so by 2017, which is what the nature data is from, nearly 75% of the state's land had been modified by human development. And you can see a really stark disparity in nature access when it comes to race in Illinois. If you're white, you're 3.6 times more likely to be living somewhere with nature nearby than if you're not white. And that disparity continues, though not at quite such an extreme rate, for where low-income communities are much more likely to experience nature deprivation compared to middle and high-income communities. So that is some data. I will pass it over to Sam to talk a little bit through the why of all of this. And I realize, Sam, I have control of this, so you can hopefully I do a better job for you, but let me know when you want to switch screens.
Awesome. Thank you, Jenny. So you're probably wondering, why is there a nature gap? So we'd like to talk a little bit about why that exists. We can go to the next slide. So as you may be aware, the history of European settlement in the US is also a history of land theft, dispossession, and forced migration of Native American tribes that has shaped our geography and ecology of our nation. And when it comes to building our cities, our suburbs, and rural communities, redlining has left the population deeply segregated. So choices were made to invest in communities and develop and maintain parks and green spaces, neglect communities of color, leaving them without the same amenities. And on top of that, when it comes to highways, landfills, oil and gas wells, and other infrastructure, the choice was made to place these things away from white communities and often directly on top of communities of color. Of course, we're still dealing with the legacy of Jim Crow, where Black people were barred from entering parks and beaches and from joining the workforce that maintains our parks and public lands. So these racist policies not only continue today, but the effects of discrimination linger in our policies. For example, how coastal landowners bar the public from enjoying beaches nearby their properties, and the fact that our natural resources and conservation workforce remains overwhelmingly white. So when we talk about having access to nature, it's not just about having nature nearby, it's also about how people get there. It's about how they enjoy the spaces, feel welcome, be it physical or cultural accessibility, seeing yourself in public lands. Having nearby nature is the bare minimum for that to happen. And we don't even have that for so many Americans. So there's a lot of work to do. So why does that matter? The nature gap matters because having any kind of nature near you, from a single tree to a river to a national park, has so many benefits that communities of color and low-income communities are disproportionately missing out on. To start with, natural areas allow recreation and that promotes active lifestyles, but that also is a really major public health element, since having nearby protected nature is very significant for positive mental health, for positive physical health, for reducing chronic illnesses and respiratory diseases that people of color are often more likely to suffer from. And lastly, greenery, as we talked about it being a hot day across the board for folks today, greenery provides protection from extreme heat and from flooding, but both of which we'll see a lot more due to climate change. And communities of color are already especially vulnerable to. Nature protects from climate hazards while also simultaneously absorbing greenhouse gas emissions and mitigating climate change. And all of these benefits are missing for so many communities of color, low-income communities, and children who see a big boost in school performance when they have access to nature. And finally, we did want to plug that this analysis is from 2020, and excitingly, we are working on some new data to redefine what the nature gap looks like right now, so that we can continue to have a sense of this problem and how we can work to solve it. It will also expand on our existing criteria, so we're looking more specifically across the board at different pollution sources and different health indicators, and we're expecting that by the end of the year. I would love to pass it to Tomas now to talk more about the great work that he is doing to address the nature gap for him.
Thanks so much, Sam and Jenny. Let me just pull up my slides. One moment. Alrighty. Wonderful. Yeah, that was wonderful to learn so much more about the early workings of the Nature Gap study And what I'll be talking about today is how that research, including many other bodies of research and my own personal experience, have led me to really design and think about solutions for addressing nature equity within Champaign County and with good fortune and hope for the rest of Illinois. But to introduce myself, my name is Tomas Delgado. I'm a Urbana resident. I'm the founder of Nurtured in Nature, which began in 2024, and I'm a graduate student here at University of Illinois in the Natural Resources and Environmental Sciences department, and really happy to be speaking with you all today about my efforts to address nature equity within Champaign County and our region and the rest of our state. So today, hopefully, we'll be able to talk through and have you all understand some of the origins of the Nurture in Nature initiative. You'll hopefully walk away with a good understanding of some of the motivators around it to address health and environmental justice. We'll look over some of the program impacts from 2024, and then we'll have an opportunity to do some visioning and think about what we can dream for and put forth into reality for the rest of 2025 and on. But before that, considering today's the eve of Juneteenth, and there's been so many wonderful Juneteenth celebrations here in Champaign County over the weekend and for the rest of this week. I wanted to just share a lesser known story that I thought was very moving in a really sort of cool way of linking ecology, enslavement, and liberation. In the 1820s, a young man named Pascal, who was a slave, had fled his plantation in Limestone County, Alabama, and his enslavers, MC Mormon, they placed a runaway ad describing him and naming a place that he likely would end up, somewhere around Nashville. But within that ad, he referenced the Big Prairie, which for those of you who might be interested or have some understanding of Alabama geography, it's mainly dominated by lots of forests. So this caught the attention of a few field botanists and ecologists who look into what was this big prairie that was referenced in this runaway slave ad, in addition to several other ads that were around the same intent to raise awareness of runaway slaves that were lost in the big prairie. This really intrigued a botanist by the name of Robert Langler, who studies at the University of Vermont. To kind of explore this natural history and its intersections with slavery in the United States. And his research led him to the Huntsville Airport, which is on the border of Limestone and Madison County, I believe. And through, talking with lots of archivists and, uplifting these really interesting ads, unfortunate ads, but interesting ones. I think it's fair to say that the prairie itself was somewhat of an ecological refuge for runaway slaves. And I just want to be able to uplift that on the eve of Juneteenth, and to really point out an interesting connection between our native ecologies and how they've supported folks and humans for legacies. But within this particular corner of American history, how it served as a refuge and a safe haven for runaway slaves who were escaping enslavement in the South. So I encourage you all to check this work out, look into this field botanist, and maybe think about your own local ecologies and how there possibly was intersections between these complicated parts of American history, in addition to its own natural history as it stand and stood for legacies. So, where did Nurtured in Nature begin? Hard to say because I've had an interest in nature equity for a long time. My background is in geography. I've often given a lot of thought to land in terms of land that I, one, am allowed to step foot on, the concept of private land, the concept of public land, and also just being acknowledging just the amount of public land that has been taken away from us for a number of different uses through human modification over the course of the last 2 centuries. But I would say a lot of this came to a head when I was approached by the Champaign County Forest Preserve District in 2022, following a referendum campaign that they led and successfully won. Um, they noticed that the voter turnout from that referendum campaign had less favorable votes from precincts of color, and it was a really good move on them to decide, one, not to ignore it, but to rethink like why that is. Not simply, well, this population might be, further away from our parks, but they really asked themselves the question, what are we doing to really build bridges between these communities and our parks. So they sought funding from the Nature Conservancy's Community Convening Fund, and they asked me to facilitate some discussions with folks of color within Champaign County on the topic of accessing their forest preserves, but also their own experience level and relationships with natural areas and nature broadly. Some of the key barriers that were uplifted was not knowing where preserves are, lack of transportation, not having someone to go with, not having enough time. But I think one unique factor and barrier was just feelings of safety, and that was a through line from every participant. And this was a mix of folks with different competency levels of comfortability going out into the natural areas within our region as well as around the country. So I was able to convene folks who really don't find a lot of recreational value in nature, but also folks who were very well experienced in going to natural areas or studying it or managing it to certain degrees. So these responses weren't abstract. They reflected, I would say, structural and emotional disconnections from nature, but also what I found to be most like meaningful and really not that surprising was that a lot of the participants agreed that nature was valuable and deserving of protection. Um, Participants shared their concerns about the loss of nature and the loss of natural lands to human modification and development. And what also stuck with me is the response to the question, why do we need forest preserves? And the focus group participants, they really shared some wonderful quotes, one being, take care of nature because nature takes care of us. And that was a sentiment that was like largely shared amongst that group, um, which which really sort of like it allowed me to really dwell on that framework that this is a like we understand that this is a reciprocal caring relationship between humans and the natural world, even for those who are not directly engaged or do not have equitable access to it. It is already understood. So a part of the focus group was also lent to thinking of solutions and intentional invitations to natural areas was one big thing. Being accompanied by more people from their community was another potential solution. And then also just having the time and having the transportation to do so. I gave this report back to the Forest Preserve District, and after that, I was really just thinking about what I can do out of accountability to those participants, but also to really fill a gap that's within Champaign County with solutions. So around the same time, I encountered the Nature Gap report, which we just learned more about, and it highlighted, a national pattern of communities of color and low-income communities that have less access to green spaces. And my takeaway was that this was not accidental. It's a policy-driven effort that happened over decades, and it's very deep. And the lack of access contributes to so many poor public health outcomes, as well as just increased climate vulnerability. The report also emphasized the need for equity in conservation and management and sciences, which I thought was, really relevant to me as a student of environmental sciences. And I wanted to think of a way of folding all of these themes, public health, just community wellness, environmental sciences, and equity all into one initiative, which, before I go into like where that led us, I wanted to just talk about some of the statistics around nature deprivations, which we already just learned a bit about, but wanted to share them here. This is the taken from the report. I believe these are the national metrics for nature deprivation. And then zooming into Illinois, here are some of the metrics related to our own state and how we're grappling with nature equity. Um, in addition to this, parallel to those bodies of research, the Champaign County Public Health Department had released the Community Health Plan, which identified mental health as the number one concern between 2021 and 2023. And more than 80% of the respondents named that as a top issue. So, knowing that there was research that connects nature to social supportive improvement and emotional resilience. Wanted to have this data sort of in the back of my mind when thinking about solutions as well. And although I don't want to be sort of romanticized to think that all we need to do is go on hikes or be stewards of land and nature to solve all these problems here. But if we're able to sort of support the resilience of our communities to navigate these issues through nature, there could really be something there. And wanted to just uplift that as another motivator for designing nurture to nature. Around this time, I was also working with an inter-organizational nonprofit called Healthy Champaign County. They're a completely volunteer-based nonprofit that focuses on nutrition access, mental health, and active living. And I've collaborated with them in the past around the introduction of the Champaign County Food Summit. A lot of my work in my career is food systems related, so they were already a natural partner of mine. And I knew that they had a initiative around active living and mental health. So I approached them with this concept, this very like unformed, rough concept of like, can we maybe put our heads together around thinking about nature equity as a public health need? And yeah, maybe we can get the framework of a nice program that could be introduced in the coming years within our area of Illinois. Um, Almost a month after I said that, the Healing Illinois grant, which is an initiative led by the Department of Human Services, announced the second iteration of funding. And that was a grant program that is meant to support racialized healing, cultural visibility, and trauma-informed practices across Illinois. So it really seemed like that grant was designed for nurture to nature. And with a stroke of good fortune, we were able to access that grant to lead us into framing up nurture to nature for the year 2024. And that brought us to a full year of hosting 4 seasonal hikes at natural areas around the county. In addition to those hikes, we also had a kind of a community celebration where we invited all members of the public to join us to talk about the history of the project, to talk about the concept of nature equity and the nature gap, and to also hear from I would say topic area experts within environmental science, I would say outdoor recreation, as well as citizen science. So we can convene some really cool social media influencers and some researchers to talk about of color to talk about their experiences as people of color navigating those subsectors of the environmental world, which was a really great celebration and conversation to uplift. And throughout the year, our hope was to address the nature gap locally. to connect solutions around nature equity to our community mental health concerns, and to build bridges to environmental stewardship through a intentional cultural lens. So in addition to the hikes, we had outreach efforts. I was able to speak to a lot of folks and build a lot of different partnerships along the way. And throughout the year, we were able to engage 108 unique hikers or participants, starting from our spring hike to our winter hike at the end. Um, and this was a pretty wide cross section of our community. As you can see, some of the age and racial demographics broken down. But really wanted to highlight that there's an interest in accessing nature locally. All we need is an invitation and the framework to do it through a culturally responsive and in tune way. In addition to that, I wanted to ensure that this was a highly trauma-informed venture. So I consulted with some of our local public health folks who focused on trauma-informed practices and research trauma amongst people of color. And it was interesting, some of the feedback that I got from them was that in many ways you're doing this backwards. The approach isn't really what's called titrated in a way of like introducing something that might be intimidating or anxiety producing in small morsels. What I'm asking people to do is join me into a natural area where they may not have cell phone reception, in an area that was likely a former sundown town, away from their community, and with an organization and a group of people that they may not know very well. So I understood that this would only appeal to folks who have already worked through some of those concerns internally, but I also wanted to invite folks who do have those concerns. So it was really important for me to just signal that, like, we're doing this together. This is all sort of in cooperation and partnerships with the landowners. We can provide transportation to get there, so you can come with us. And it's just a short, easy hike, and the emphasis is on getting to know each other, not on environmental education or advocacy or even talking about equity to strong degrees. It was really meant to be accessible, friendly community building, and that's what it ended up being. In addition to the impacts, I built a lot of different partnerships from a number of organizations, nonprofits, and agencies here in Illinois. Incredibly proud of the partnership that we were able to collaborate with Prairie Rivers Network, and super grateful to be here today to share this story through their network. But it was also important for me to conduct that outreach to other organizations to ensure that they knew that this work was being conducted and to explore opportunities for collaborations. And I did this because I wanted this initiative and this work to be institutionalized. I wanted it to be funded by an organization so that it can go on into the future. It was interesting and really fun to do it in a volunteer capacity. It was a lot of work, but incredibly appreciative of Prairie Rivers Network to now accommodate this effort and see the hope and the meaning behind it for the rest of 2025 and on. I wanted to share something that also sort of complicates all of this. In my research for framing nurtured in nature, I did come across some studies that really kind of pushed back on the idea that nature is a ultimate mental health benefitor. And mainly because so much of the data that's included is not acknowledging the demographics of participants that were interviewed. There was a reference to an acronym WEIRD, or Western, Educated, Industrialized, Rich, and Democratic, as a reliance for their data pools. And we as you can see here, only 60% of the studies, or 60% of the studies, failed to actually report participant ethnicity. So knowing that people of color have, at least within the West, especially within the United States, have a very complicated relationship currently and historically with nature, it would be irresponsible to just throw a blanket statement that like going out in nature will just help your mental health. And I wanted to highlight that not to take away from the impacts of nurturing nature, but to really expose like this is a gap in research that if anyone's interested in researching, please do it. I mean, I think we do need to have culturally specific research around mental health and nature, and I think it would only strengthen our solutions as we think of them. So wanted to just highlight that as one thing that I came across while conducting research for the initiative. Also wanted to highlight the volunteers that helped me throughout 2024. And as you see a cross section from our community, extension, family services, folks that studied community health, folks representing our Forest Preserve District and our public health institutions here. So a really wonderful cross section of our community, and they helped me a lot with sort of thinking about how the work can be trauma informed, how it can be beneficial for our community and for the land itself. And I also appreciate a lot of the recognition that I was able to get and the opportunities to conduct outreach and promote the initiative throughout the year 2024. And I think it all culminated through being awarded the River Stewards Award in 2024 by PRN. So yeah, I just wanted to just show you that the work was very well received by folks within our community and from across the state. So really hoping to continue that momentum into 2025. We were able to have our first hike in the spring at Kickapoo State Park. It was well attended. We had a great time. The weather was beautiful, and people really enjoyed themselves. And there were so many just great testimonies and accounts that were shared with me directly afterwards. A lot of folks that continued on into 2025 after learning about us and participating in our programming from 2024. So as we expand into 2025, we're hoping to continue to bridge connections to environmental access, wellness, and equity through tangible and joyful ways. And you all can help by simply just sharing the story. We have written about it through Prairie Rivers Network's newsletters, and then there's other opportunities to hear from us about this work and what we're aiming to do for the rest of 2025. We do have an upcoming hike for the summer at Warbler Ridge Conservation Area, and that's just south of the Eastern Illinois University campus in Charleston. If you are someone who identifies as of color, you can register through that QR code and reach out to me if you have any other questions about the initiative. But I'm going to stop there. Thank you so much for allowing me to share about this initiative, and super excited to see it through 2025 and on.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Tomas and Jenny and Sam. I really appreciate all of the work you've done on this and continue to do. As I mentioned, CAB is refreshing the research as we speak right now. So we hope to connect with them later this year and potentially do another presentation or share that new report out as we continue to dig into nature access issues in Illinois. You did hear me speak earlier about some federal funding hurdles that we had to navigate. So I just want to be perfectly honest. We did go and apply again for that initial grant that you heard Tomas speak about, the Healing Illinois grant. And we were awarded that for 2025. But it came through as federal funding. And so we actually, I had a moment of freak out, to be honest with you all, and went to my board and said, I don't feel that we can move forward with this programming, with this funding. And thankfully, our board had our backs here and said, you know what, let's give the money back and let's go forward with the work because it's that important and use our own resources. So we are moving forward. We had a couple months delay, but as you heard, we had our first and successful hike at Kickapoo in April, and now we'll be starting to recruit for this upcoming hike with our friends at Grand Prairie Friends, who I think a couple might be on this today. So thank you all for hosting us for our next hike at Warbler Ridge. We're really excited about that on July 19th. But yeah, just to be perfectly clear, like, you know, this work is extremely important. And right now, with the current administration, it seems as if it's illegal in some way to work on justice issues. And Prairie Rivers Network is absolutely moving forward, not in agreement with that. And knowing that our mission and our work for decades has been focused on fixing injustice. And so this is a new area for us. We're really excited about it. You've heard us talk about river access across the state. This is another component that we feel very, very strongly on in terms of making sure people have access to what we all love and treasure. It's part of why I work at Prairie Rivers for sure. So for folks in Champaign-Urbana, stay safe and dry. For folks everywhere else, we really, and everyone really, really appreciate your time and joining us today, learning more on this topic. And again, hoping you all can help us scale this effort up. And we can attempt to close, make a dent in the nature gap in Illinois. So thank you so much. Have a good day.